We're back in the home studio again to introduce the next episode of the Smarter Business Podcast. This episode, again, has John Osberg as the interviewer, and this time he comes in with a gaggle of community organizers. We have Del Reid of Bills Mafia and 26 shirts, Dan Gigante, also of 26 shirts and 19 ideas, and Matt Carlucci, who heads up the Buffalo B Team, Buffalo Soup Fest, and also works for ESC. The conversation in this episode ranges from founder stories to how to utilize influencers, social impact, and the power of connection. If you like what you hear, please share this podcast and subscribe. Feel free to comment or reach out to us as well. We would love to know what you think.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for being a part of the Smarter Business Podcast. Really, it's an honor to have all three of you here and that we were able to coordinate our busy schedules. So welcome. Why don't we just start with intros? Obviously, I'm John Osberg. And why don't we start here?
I'm Del Reid, co-founder of Bills Mafia, co-founder of 26 Shirts.
Dan Gigante, partner at 19 Ideas, and thanks for saying co-founder at 26 Shirts.
My name's Matt Carlucci, general man about town and founder of the Buffalo Soup Fest, among other things.
Excellent. Well, thanks for being here. One of the things we want to definitely intertwine in our discussions today are going to be the civic engagement piece, but also business, of course, is important. I've got founders of various entities, causes sitting here in front of me. So why don't we just dive in? And again, there's connection here between all three of you, and that's why this was so exciting to bring together. So why don't we just start? Like, where do we want to go back to B Team? Do we want to go to, the story of how Bills Mafia came together and it brought, Dan and Del together? It's an open canvas. So what do you think is best in terms of start of the story here?
I think B Team was around first, so why don't we go farther back down the timeline?
So I have interesting stories about how I connected with both of these guys. In fact, the B Team was started as an organization for young professionals to become engaged in the Buffalo community, and it started when my wife was actually pregnant with our first son, which now I have two, and I wanted to do something so young professionals can sort of give back to the community and create a future for kids coming up in Buffalo, so they wouldn't leave. Brain drain was a bit of a thing back then, and people were leaving town at a rapid pace. So I started doing events, and one of the events that we did that we actually got volunteers for was the Buffalo Wing Fest. And getting volunteers for the Buffalo Wing Fest was not super easy just because the reach of my own personal reach wasn't that huge. So that's when I reached out to Del, because this whole Bills Mafia thing had been happening. And before it became the thing it is today, it still had a ton of influence, and it still definitely does now. And I reached out to Del via probably Twitter, I would guess, and said,
Are you on Twitter?
Yeah.
Allegedly, right?
Yeah. and said, let's pool some of our resources here and do some good stuff. And then in doing events and stuff like that, I ended up working at an event called Buffalo Stiletto Run. And doing the Buffalo Stiletto Run, I was sort of working behind the scenes on that. And through that, I more or less met Dan, who almost
was
won.
that when I bid it?
Yeah.
2 feet from the
It's,
or the next year I won, so I don't mind talking about the fall.
The year that you came to prominence in my head was the year that you.
Yeah.
Well, and actually, I'm glad you're talking about Dan. So something seems a little bit off about all of our attire, excluding Dan, I think. So I don't know. Why don't we try to,
Snap.
Okay, that's better. That's a nice shirt there. What does it actually say, Dan?
It's the take on that the box that the wings come in.
Yeah, the greatest wings of them all. That's awesome. Well, cool. So picking back up where we left after now writing, our apparel here, team apparel. So Matt, you were saying you had bumped into Dan and you had fallen at the Stiletto Run, and so continue please onward about how that started to build as a relationship.
Yeah, so I just kind of got to know sort of the local community and some of the people that were active in it, of which Dan was, an up and comer, if not an already there, activist in the community and sort of a general business acumen guy. So I definitely wanted to be within his circle of influence, and I eventually got there. It took a while, but and then Del, who was giving of his time and all of himself at any given moment, was all on board with helping me out without barely even knowing him, which is awesome, and that's kind of his style anyway. And then from
That's how
there,
we met too. Fun enough. Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
so maybe parlaying
Yeah.
into that's awesome. Parlaying into that, then so maybe the connect here between these two, you two fine gentlemen too.
Well, funny. I'll pick up on the stiletto race for a second because the time that I bid it that year.
I did win it the next year. Is that what you're gonna say?
No, I was still at Clever Method then, and because it was maybe July, and I hadn't met Katie yet. So that's actually how she met me. She's like, "Who's that dude that fell like that?"
You're welcome.
But then a couple months later, I left the company I'd started and was at for 10 years and started You and Who, which was based on Tom's. I was volunteering in the evenings and trying to help out where I could. And when I saw the Tom's model of how you could weave giving into the company, I was like, this is it. So
Social impact.
So I did that with T-shirts, and we donated a matching. Every time a shirt was sold, we would donate to a homeless shelter or a shelter that helped victims of domestic violence or at-risk or runaway youth. And then about 3 years into that, decided I wanted to make my own shirts in America, and didn't like any of the options that were there. And so I figured out how to do that. And then a friend of ours, Steve Rains, connected us. I remember we had lunch at what's it called again?
Hamlin House.
Hamlin House. And so there was a Bills Mafia, one of the perks for the crowdfunding campaign. I don't know if I mentioned that crowdfunding campaign, and one of the perks was Bills Mafia shirt, and which turned out to be the best selling one too. And then I guess you can take it from there because it's only a couple months after.
I never knew that till like years later. You're like, oh, that was actually one of the best selling shirts we had. I was like,
It's
oh.
not this one though. It's a different one.
No, it's older.
Okay,
It's-
much older.
it's,
Okay, cool.
But so Steve Rains connected us, and basically Steve said, Del, you're into like football and people like football, and Dan, you're into shirts and people like shirts, so maybe the two of you can connect. And so we met. He explained to me the whole Indiegogo campaign that he had going on with You and Who, and how they were trying to basically create their own USA-made shirts. And I was like, oh, that's really cool, man. Yeah, here's some designs. Good luck with it. Have a nice life, And a few months later, I had this idea to sell T-shirts to help families with medical needs, and totally had forgotten about this connection. No offense, but it just didn't even dawn on me because it all happened. Like I always call it my Jerry Maguire moment, where I put this idea together, put it out on Twitter, and was suddenly accountable to it, But so he called me I think that same day that I tweeted it and said, "Who's printing these shirts?" And I was like, "I have no idea." I was thinking Teespring or just some online fulfillment center. Mm-hmm. And then he said, "Well, can You and Who do it?" And I was like, "Yes, absolutely," because I just want to have another Buffalo connection baked into the whole situation, which is perfect. And then it's kind of taken off from there,
The rest is history, as they say.
Taking off is, I think, putting it lightly. I mean, what you guys have done. I think I'd like to drill in on, what is it about your makeup as a person, pedigree, that's all three of you, that's led to you wanting to do such incredible things, impactful things in our communities. Maybe there's a watershed moment when you were younger, whatever. I mean, I'm just curious to know. Maybe starting with Matt down the line, and go down to Del.
I think, as I mentioned earlier, I wanted to have a reason for my kids to stay in Buffalo. I started young, I guess you could say, having children, and I wasn't sure what I was even going to do when I grew up. And in fact, I just changed jobs a year ago, so I'm still figuring out who I am. And I knew at that time that Buffalo was in this sort of do or die time frame. This was 2008. And I knew that, one way or another, I was either going to have to come up with some way to keep my family here or figure out where I was going to go. And I ended up, starting this not-for-profit to try to find a way to get the community to turn around. I sort of did the whole approach of, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Somebody smarter than me came up with that a million years ago, I think. But, I use that as my motivation for kind of everything I've done since. is make a better Western New York and a better world, for my kids and hopefully for their kids. Plus, I didn't want to have to look for a job somewhere else or move or, just figure out how to buy a house outside of Western New York, where real estate prices were still pretty darn good at the time. And, that's why I also wanted to connect myself to people like Dan and Adele and you. And so, Buffalo keeps getting better, and we don't necessarily have to keep Buffalo a secret, but to keep it as our own thing. The natives should, of Buffalo should reap the rewards that making Buffalo a better place, creates.
Very well said. And just a funny thing to key on, there is a bit of selfishness, but also selflessness in your approach of wanting to, make sure that there was opportunity for your kids and for their kids, but then also you didn't want to.
Anytime you do good, you're making yourself feel good.
Yeah.
So you can't feel guilty about that. And
Right.
I've always said that, don't feel guilty about making the world a better place if it makes your world a better place too. So.
That's such a well said thing, Matty. Well done. Danny, how about you?
That's
man?
a great. I'm just gonna
Well said.
build off that because I agree. That's actually I think my motivation for doing good is because like it just feels so good. I've always kind of done the right thing, and then on the other side, and how this is like, I say it all the time. I'm like the luckiest guy I know for a lot of reasons. I get choked up a lot, so I'm not going to go any further with that. But I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. I remember when I was in fourth grade, I had my sister's boyfriend had somehow in the shop class, he was making buttons. So I'm like, so I put this catalog of like Journey buttons and Air Supply. I'm dating myself.
Sweet.
And then I sold the buttons to kids around school, and then we place the order, we get the buttons, and then sell them. So I've kind of always destined, I think, to be a business owner. And then, so then, like I mentioned, I started one company and then left that to start You and Who. And then we kind of danced around a little bit, but You and Who is like the official corporation. But like we shifted focus, and because 26 Shirts just took off. And so that's like the only thing we do with that. But being able to combine business and be an entrepreneur with every single shirt we sell helping someone, it's just literally, it's like there's nothing better.
It's a no-brainer is what it is too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's incredible. Well said. How about you, Del?
For me, I was working at Roswell Park as a web developer. I thought I was going to spend like 30 years there in a cube, retire, move to Florida, just like kind of like go through the motions my whole life. But I didn't know that God had something different in store for me. But I don't know. I always joke that I've seen too many Spider-Man movies. Uncle Ben always tells Peter, with great responsibility. I'm sorry, with great power comes great responsibility. I can't believe I flubbed that line. But
No.
even not to get too like whatever, but in the Bible, to whom much is given, much is expected. And I feel like I have been given a lot. I've been blessed with a lot, and just to be able to take that, like this whole social media audience that I somehow have, just through the advent of Bills Mafia, which was a complete accident, just how it began. So with this audience that seems to pay attention to what I say, anybody who's watching my football, who listens to my football takes, knows that like whatever Del says, just the opposite thing is going to happen. But just to have this audience, and with it being a Western New York audience, and that whole City of Good Neighbors thing, it's so much more than just a mantra or a sign as you drive into the city. I mean, that really is part of our DNA. So to be able to take that audience and kind of direct it in a direction that gives back to the community is a huge. To be able to have that ability, it's such a huge responsibility. And so, because I could just spend my time like putting out tweets that are just fart jokes and making fun of the Patriots or something, but really
Both.
But yeah, those get worked in. But I wanted to do something like powerful with it. So once the whole Bills Mafia thing started, I looked into like creating a nonprofit and doing fundraiser tailgates, stuff like that. And then once the whole shirt idea came along, and obviously You and Who with how they were positioned and what they were doing, it was just an absolute no-brainer just to follow through it. We were going to do it for only 1 year. That was the idea, like 26 shirts.
Right, limited run.
You're right. And then we just saw that the demand for the shirts was great. The demand for help was great. And that's where the whole responsibility thing comes in. Like we had to keep going. The opportunity was just out right there in front of us, so we had to do it.
That's incredible. Just listening to this, it's like it's an honor to be here and be a fly on the wall. And I just want to make a quick note as you were saying that, the way that we connected. So I've known Danny for quite a while, Matt's, a good amount of time as well, but Del, you and I are newly minted friends. It was actually on this podcast that I dropped your name because I talked about the city good neighbors and whatever. I think I was interviewing somebody, I forget who, maybe it was John Gavigan or some, or Raj Suchek, actually, that's right. Anyway, and so I remember reaching out to you because I felt like I had mentioned good friend, Del Reid. And I'm like, and I had this moment of like self-correction like a week later or whatever it aired. And I remember messaging you again, the power of connection here. 3 of you right here, everyone in the studio, it's all about power of connection, right? And so I reached out and I said, hey man, like I want to let you know, like I didn't mean to like sound like I knew you. And then that's how we got talking. We met.
You spoke it into existence.
I willed it into existence, right into the universe. So no, and I just wanted to key on that because I thought that was cool. But that's exciting to hear your stories and how all 3 of you are together and you're doing good. I'm actually wearing my Bombast socks right now, if that's how you say it. Which again, another social impact thing. So. We've kind of touched on some of this earlier, and I want to pivot over to like what have you each of us? We'll start again with Matt. Done to make a business, a cause smarter, more efficient. And I know, Matt, you kind of touched on this earlier when you looked at Del and for his influence on Twitter. So maybe we can relive some of that and then dive deeper and, as we get on the line.
Yeah, and just to add to that, anybody in Western Europe can call Del a good friend without him knowing it.
Good to know.
Because he is a good friend to everybody in Buffalo. It's crazy all the influence he has. Hand me $10 under the table.
I'll get you later.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think one piece of advice that I gave, I guess I could say I gave myself, was, leaning on influencers, as long as there was a give and take relationship. So, a lot of organizations, focus right now on social media. They want to get Twitter followers, they want to get Facebook followers, or Instagram now, or TikTok, or
LinkedIn.
Our
favorite.
LinkedIn, of course. But
sorry.
So the reason I first connected with Del really is because I was trying to find volunteers for the Wing Fest and then eventually Soup Fest. And I reached out to Del because Del, I could tell off the bat from just his Twitter, his tweets, between all the fart jokes and Patriot jokes, was there was actually a giving spirit, and you could tell right away. And I knew that if I said, hey, listen, I need you to say the Wingfest needs 100 volunteers for this weekend, he would do that. And so his influence, which was at the time maybe 30,000 people on Twitter, which was a heck of a lot, even 12 years ago, or I think I've known you for 12 years, whatever. Yeah, so I leaned on his influence, and I said, here's the message I want to portray, and here's the message I want to put out, and put it in your own words and make it happen. I think influencers now is a thing where, you get a Kardashian to wear your makeup, and then of course now the Kardashians have their own makeup, but you lean on somebody's expertise and somebody's influence and somebody's passion for something, and you can take that and put your message through them as long as they're accepting of that. I haven't paid Del any money other than the shirts that I've bought, but also the shirts that I bought I know have also gone to organizations and people in need too. So it's just sort of like that win-win of leaning on somebody else's influence in the community. And I'd like to say that my own networking skills and my own influence in the community, whatever that may be, is a lot in part to the people that I've already leaned on for influence, like Dan and Del. So.
Well said. That's great. Cool. Yeah. Dan, what are you?
I'll give 2 quick ones. I think one of the things I try to live by is it's not win or lose, it's win or learn. And so don't be afraid to try things and fail. So I'm constantly trying to make it a little smarter, because we don't have all the answers, and you got to try things, see if it worked, and if it didn't, okay, just try the next thing, or if it did work, okay, can we make it better? So I think that's just a key,
Say that one more time.
mindset.
Win or learn.
It's not win or lose, it's win or learn. So you kind of take failure out of it, and so why not try something? Because it's kind of how I decided to start a t-shirt company. You probably thought the same thing, or decided to make my own t-shirts. And then the other one is, and I love that with Techstars here now, but I read the Brad Feld's Startup Community's book a while ago, and I had prescribed to his way of thinking too. So it was great to have like a saying for it, which is give before you get. I think they've shortened it to give first. But like my wife makes fun of me because I'll take a coffee meeting with anybody, and I think it's just because really what's so important is people and the connections. We're talking about that a lot, and I mentioned do the right thing before. So I mean, I think that's just the smartest thing you can do is always just be a great person and help people when you can. And I've also found that, I mean, this is a marathon, not a sprint, right? So when I was at Clever Method for 10 years, I never thought I would leave that company, but I treated people right and I made a lot of connections. There's probably interns that I had or the connections, maybe a marketing coordinator then, but now it was like 15, 20 years later, a director of marketing. So you just, if you're a good person, they're going to remember that. And so it's the most important thing is people and connections, I think.
That's awesome. Resonates with me in my current, inflection point with some of the things that, Bad Golf Business School is one of them that we've all talked about. So this is like, again, it goes back to universe and pulse. So anyway, enough about me. Del, how about you?
I think Bill and Ted said it best based on what they said and what I believe is that like be excellent to each other. And that really is, I mean, that's a great, whoa, right? Yeah, it's a great way. Strange things are afoot at the Circle K. Yeah, but that's the first thing I thought. But that's really true, though. I mean, I just try to be cool with everybody. And I see people, in Buffalo, I see businesses outside of Buffalo, and they're so contentious with other people or other businesses. And, 26 Shirts is a company that I helped start. And so I'm kind of like it or not, I'm the brand ambassador for that company. And the company is based on giving to people who are in sucky situations, helping them out, providing an outlet for the community to kind of like put its arms around that family. So hopefully we sell a ton of shirts, but at the very least they got some attention and hopefully people were tweeting at them or Facebooking them or whatever and saying, hey, we're in this together with you. And so if that's what the company's based on, I have to be that person. I like to think I am that person. There's some days,
yeah, that person.
But there's days when I wake up, on the wrong side of the bed, I'm cranky or whatever. But like, you have to be cool with everybody and just have to love on people. Really, is what it is. And in terms of like smart things, working smarter or smarter businesses or whatever. Like I hooked up with Dan, which was great. Hooked up with Matt, who's given me a bunch of different opportunities just to network and to get our brand out there and just all different things. It sounds so businessy and corporate-y when I say our brand and whatever, but like it's just being cool with people and just loving on them and being transparent, being authentic. Like I mentioned, like being cranky when you get out of bed. Like you can even then I'll sit there. I spend way too much time on Twitter, like Dan alluded to a few minutes ago. But it's like I'll say like I'm in a crappy mood today, or this this stinks. But just being real, I think, is the most important thing you can do. Don't be fake. Be who you are, And I think if you're authentic and you're real, then success will follow. Hopefully your authentic, real self is not a jerk,
Yeah, I was going to answer that.
Right, yeah.
Well, it's funny, I was just going to say, it's getting harder and harder to be an asshole, which is good. Used to be, you were a snake oil salesman and you screwed everybody and moved town, nobody knew. Now, I'm amazed that some people are assholes with their own businesses because, like, word's going to get out and it's just not going to succeed.
Especially in this town, Dan.
Which is a good thing. It's a good thing. So stop being an asshole and then there's no problem.
It's funny you say that. I think back to when we first connected, which is probably through Dan's very involved also with Startup Weekend, or when that was around, still around. Techstars had brought it back, and so I remember meeting him. Maybe it was some sort of startup event because I was a founding employee of a software startup, and I remember meeting with you. And I was 22. We were 3 or 4 people and wearing suit and tie. And
you had a nice bureau suit, I remember.
Yeah, a bunch of bureau. Shout out to Bureau, Johnny and Joe, because you're a big bureau guy. And I just remember though, like retrospectively now, 8 years, whatever it's been, 7, 8 years later, I remember thinking to myself, at the time, I felt like I was like that salesy guy, wearing the suit because that's what we had to do as a startup. At least that's what we wanted to do at that point. Now they wear flip flops and sandals because it's it's tech, it's dev. But it's funny you say that about that because it's full circle. Here we are sitting. Little did I think, like you said, 10 years at Clever Method. Did you think you're gonna be out doing your own thing? I never thought I'd be sitting here on a podcast with you, with Maddie, with Del, Bills Mafia, 26 shirts. So incredible. Yeah, this is really cool. So I appreciate you guys being here. Great commentary, insights. This is going to be really impactful, I think, to our listeners, our watchers. Let's do a round robin, around the table, if you will, on open-ended. Anything you want to plug? I mean, we should talk about too before we leave. How we can find 26 shirts, the things you guys are doing. But open-ended. Is there a book you're reading, a podcast you're listening to, and then obviously throw a plug in for the endeavors you're working on? I know, Matt, you got something coming up at the end of the month. So why don't we do that? Each person.
Yeah, a couple of things. One actually was a book that I've been meaning to read for the longest time, and actually I had coffee with you, and you talked me into finally getting it. I didn't read it because I don't read. I'm capable of reading. I'm capable of reading. The Go-Giver.
The Go-Giver.
Go-Giver is
on your desk. Yeah, I just bought it because of him too.
It's such. Oh, I should have sent it to you. You could have got it free on Audible.
Shout out to Bob Berg and John David Mann. John David Mann actually used to live in Rochester. 2 New York Times bestsellers.
Amazing.
Incredible guys.
Absolutely, and it's that's one of those books that. It's sort of a fictional story, but it's
parable.
It sets it exactly a parable. To keep going along the Bible lines, it really is I don't even know what you want to call it, but it is sort of a Bible for me that I didn't even know that existed, because that's sort of the way I live my life.
Give me goosebumps.
And I try to give first, and give until it hurts, and then give a little bit more, because that's when there's nothing wrong with receiving, and that's kind of how I've always felt.
They say that in the book, actually.
Never be afraid
to open yourself up to being,
exactly.
a receiver.
And so that's a huge thing, and it's actually changed me. I read that a couple weeks ago, and I listened to it a couple of weeks ago, and I really sort of approached things a lot differently since then. And if I could say anything to anybody in Western New York that wants to get out and start a business, or get in business, or even find a job, or change jobs, or whatever. There are 1,000 networking things happening every week. Every day there's 3 or 4 or 5 different things. I have to choose between 3 things every night of the week, or just go home and be with my wife and kids, which I do more often than not. But there's all these options just to get out there and let you get out there and meet people. And if you're your authentic self, like Del mentioned, and you get out there and you're yourself, you're going to find that job. You're going to find that funding opportunity. You're going to find that mentor, or whatever it is that you're looking for out there. And, go to everything. There's all the Techstars events. There's the Open Coffee Club. And, I actually started in Buffalo an organization called Startup Summit, which is another thing for entrepreneurs. If you're trying to get started, connecting with mentors and attorneys and the kind of people you need. Unfortunately, you need attorneys in your life. Shout out to my attorney friends. But honestly, get out there and do as much as you possibly can. My stuff, your stuff, everybody has different opportunities just to get together, and most of them are free, unless you want to buy a drink. But there's always like crudité and cured meats out there on a table somewhere. So get out there and just be seen and be among the people of Western New York. And if you get known as somebody that's good to do business with, business falls into your lap.
Well said. And I'm not sure when this will air, just one last thing, but March 30th, you have an event coming, maybe just a quick plug. Again, I'm not sure if...
Oh, geez, which one? I have like 4 different things. So April 8th, Startup Summit is having an event with Colligan Law at the Colligan Law offices. So if you're looking to start a business, or you want to connect with...
Is that with Matt Pelkey? You working with him?
Yes.
Maddie?
Yeah.
The 2 Matts.
Yes.
Mattitude.
We get Mattitude, exactly. Oh, we'll get into that another time. Yeah. So Mattitude is sort of like, I don't even know what you call it. That's my mantra. It's my mantra. Yeah. It's just my give first sort of mentality. I just call it Mattitude because my name is Matt and it's easy. Those are the 2 big things, but I got a ton of other stuff going on. Just look on the internet.
Next episode, right?
Go on LinkedIn, go on the internet, find everything that's out there. There's a ton to do.
Sweet. Well said. Danny. You guys go.
I just want to say, like, Matt just dropped a real subtle, like, Google me.
Yeah.
Drop the mic, Google me.
I am on the Google.
The Google.
You're gonna probably hate this. Well, I'm gonna play on the names for a second. So, I saw this. My wife makes fun of me for my tangents, because if I start saying one thing, I go on these tangents like all the time.
Love it.
I think it's because I have ADD. But I did come up with the best thing I ever. It's just so great. Del does everything at 26 Shirts. We finally just hired a marketing coordinator, and she's awesome. We probably do wish we did that sooner. I think we should have done it sooner. It's the thing we talk about. But I was like, you know what? Delegation starts with Del. Right?
Nice.
That's
Boom.
really hard. Yeah, if these were not a fixed drop.
That's his proudest moment in our
It was. When I came up with that.
That is so good. You got Attitude, we got Tangents, we got Delegate.
Delegate starts with Del. Yep.
Cool. Well, maybe just a quick some stuff you got going on. Takeaways.
Well, I'll just say since you talked about a book, and because I've said this recently, I have to reread it because it's literally been, oh my God, I'm dating myself again. I think it was 1994. I was in the Air Force, and I used to go to bookstores, and I remember reading Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich at like B. Dalton, or whatever it was called. And what I think is great about it is it talks about like this like mastermind team, whatever. And I think part of that is just realizing your strengths and teaming up with people that have strengths in other areas, and hopefully you each realize that like, you know, you might not be good at that thing, but you're good at this thing, and not fault anyone for that. And then another thing is just to build off. I was telling this to a group of students recently, like just do stuff, like do as much stuff as you can. I think you're a great example of it. You're talking about how you're at those events. Now you're doing the bad golf school. Is that what it's called?
Business school, bad golf business school. Yeah, BGBS, all good. Mouthful.
But then related to that, and this ties into that, it's not win or lose, win or learn. Like if you have an idea for a business, just do it. Fucking do it. You know, like there's a lot of people out there that'll help, and there's just do it while you have a job. Start it like with a little side hustle.
Key point.
It is key point. I didn't follow that advice actually in it. So now I tell everyone to do that. I love seeing people come up. You know, it's the best. It's got to be like something you're passionate about, and then if that's there and you're into it, like you can make it work.
Well said. That's awesome. Del, last but not least.
Yeah, I'm gonna be all over the place, so I'm gonna try and like keep the thoughts, as concise as possible. But I just watched last night. Whenever somebody watches this, I don't know, but like last night, I just watched Nick Wallenda walk over a live volcano on a tight wire in Nicaragua. There's one Nick Wallenda in this world. I'm guessing. There's not a lot of people out there that are trying to do what he does, or are able to do what he does. He's the guy that like 7 or 8 years ago walked over Niagara Falls. Yeah. There is something that you are good at that no one else is. Not the way that you are. Probably not high wires over volcanoes, but there's something that you are good at, and it's something that you enjoy. And I was always good at computer programming. I mean, maybe some of the people that have used my apps at Roswell might disagree, but I could always make my way through with that. And so I figured, well, I'm good at it, so this is what I'm supposed to do. I didn't love it, but I've always been really good at really dumb one-liners and puns and things like that. And I love T-shirts, and I love football and sports, and somehow it all came together into what I do now. Who I am, and so I would encourage anybody who's listening to this podcast. This is where I'm supposed to look at the camera and say, but like there's something that you're good at that no one else is good at, and you can make a living at it. It's going to take time, effort, sometimes a lot of time, sometimes a lot of effort. I didn't start doing this until I was a couple months shy of my 40th birthday. So whatever it is, don't be afraid to look at what opportunities are available with your passions and what you love. And there's something out there. And I would encourage you, do it in a way that gives back to the community. I'm not to get into politics, but there's enough people out there that are just in it for themselves, that are just trying to make as much money as they can so they can just be comfortable and die. I mean, I don't know. So like, use your life, invest in other people, give anything you do, find a way to work something into it that is going to benefit your fellow man. So, I mean, and it's not hard. It's not hard to do that. So, I don't know. So that's kind of what I've been thinking about lately, is people walking over volcanoes and how that translates to every person, in the world. Unique, and you're good at it. And
passion.
One guy I just discovered on Twitter a couple weeks ago, Naval, Naval. He's like some tech investor or something like that. But I've listened to his podcast, and he kind of iterates that point. So I just stole a lot from what I listened from him. But there's something that you're uniquely good at, or you're specialized at, that you can make work for you. So I would just encourage people, like, follow your dreams, like Dan said. Not to sound like a cat poster here, you know what I mean? But like, follow your dreams, like Dan said. Don't
cliches,
right?
No,
You know,
but if they're true,
it's true. But like,
you gotta actually do it though.
Yeah, but don't do it reckless. You know, I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur until I realized when I was in elementary school. My best friend Jeremy and I, we used to live like next door to each other. You know, our houses were behind each other. And do you remember those ViewMaster toys? You remember those? You'd look through them and you could click through. So I had a ton of those little slide wheels. Jeremy had a projector for them, and we used to charge kids 25 cents to come in, and we would read through the slide projector and the things on the playroom wall or whatever. And so I look back now, owning my own business, going, holy crap! I've been an entrepreneur since I was 8. You know, I just didn't realize it. So I don't know. Examine yourself. Like, try and be as open with yourself as possible. Think about who you are. What, you know, not only what are you good at, but what do you enjoy doing? What motivates you? I don't know. This is so open ended, so I'm just gonna end it there. I don't know, because I could just go on forever and waste all the time.
I could listen to this all day. We're probably a little bit over time, so our team back there might be having to do some magician work.
Edit me completely out.
At like 1.5.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah. It's higher pitch.
I don't know. I talk that way already, so I don't know.
Well, I'll end it with thanking you guys seriously for being here. This was like a joy. I wish we had another 90 minutes more or whatever. And I'll end it with, like, you know, I hope we can hang out more outside. I mean, we do already kind of connect and hang out, but whatever I got to do, if I got to coerce you to do it, to hang out. But seriously, it's been a pleasure. So thanks for being here and sharing your journeys, your stories, and for doing what you do in our community. That is the biggest thing that I want to stress as someone that's, you know, an up and comer, if you will, in the community world. You guys are all stars. So well done. Well done. Give me some skin. Aww. Give me some skin, brother. You guys are great. Thanks.
I'm not good at high fives.
Give me,
Says the
guy that does, you know, comments on high five technique you could do in my weapon, whatever I'm doing.
Look at the wrist. You got to look at the wrist. That's how you line it up.
That's true.
That was the elbows. That was the elbows.
Anyway,
well, depends on how big your hands
are.
That's
a wrap.
Okay, that wraps up this episode. A lot of great stuff there. Please feel free to check out Bills Mafia, 26 shirts, 19 ideas, ESC, Buffalo Soup Fest, and the Buffalo B Team. And if you like what you heard in this episode, subscribe, comment, tell your friends. That's how we grow our audience. Thank you.